Hey guys, tonight we're wandering back to the heart of the ancient Persian plateau, where the wind is dry, the sun is relentless, and believe it or not, people figured out how to air condition their homes using nothing more than bricks, shadows, and the occasional underground river. You're standing just outside the walls of Yazd. It's hot, not just grab a nice tea hot, but why do I even have skin hot? You probably wouldn't survive this barefoot. The desert light shimmers off the rooftops, and your sandals squish slightly from the heat-softened leather. Around you, the landscape is dust-colored and vast. It's a place where survival means being clever or crispy. But then, you see it. A strange tower, tall and narrow, jutting from the roof of a beige mud brick home. It's got open slits on every side, like a giant periscope sniffing for breeze. Another one appears down the block, and another. These aren't watchtowers or minarets. These are the secret to why people here aren't melting into puddles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into the narrow lane ahead, stepping between walls that tower above you, close enough that the rooftops nearly touch. You feel the first pocket of shadow, it's nearly 10 degrees cooler. A cat blinks lazily from a windowsill. Somewhere, water drips gently into a basin. The heat still hangs in the air, but the breeze is different here. You didn't notice it at first, but it's constant, gentle, intentional. These ancient alleyways aren't just charming, they're engineered. They angle slightly, shift gently, funneling whatever breath of air the desert offers into the spaces between homes. The walls are high not just for privacy or defense, but because they shade each other. Every inch of architecture is part of a silent strategy to defeat the heat. And those towers you saw? Those are badgers' windcatchers. They aren't just impressive, they're functional, funneling air down into homes, even pulling it across pools of water for extra cooling. More on those soon. But first, you arrive at your lodging for the night. A modest home, mud brick and sun-faded, stands before you. The front door is unassuming, the kind that looks like it might creak even if it doesn't. A servant waves you inside. The air inside is different, cooler, still dry but restful, like the shade of a tree that's been there for centuries. You pass through a narrow hallway, then suddenly emerge into a courtyard. It's lush, unexpectedly so. A shallow pool reflects the pale blue sky, and flowering vines trail along the walls. Birds chatter softly. There's a breeze here, too. Not wild, not forceful, just steady and smooth, gliding down from the windcatcher above like a very polite ghost. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat and sip from a cup of mint tea. Its warmth oddly refreshing in this slightly cooled cocoon of mud brick and motionless air. You wipe your brow, but it's not drenched anymore. It's as if the house is breathing for you. And in a way, it is. Historians still argue whether these early windcatchers were originally inspired by Egyptian air shafts, or if the Persians independently engineered them based on pure environmental necessity. But what's clear is that by the 5th century BCE, Persians weren't just adapting to the heat, they were mastering it. Your host gestures upward. The wind, he says in Old Persian, or maybe just gestures in a way that makes you feel like you understood him anyway. It does the work. That's when you start noticing the details. Vents in the floor, damp cloth hung over openings, and the stone basin in the center of the courtyard. It's not just decorative. It's placed there to allow air to pass over the water, cooling it before it circulates into the rooms around you. Primitive air conditioning? Sure. But somehow, it feels more elegant than anything your modern thermostat can offer. You lie back on a cushion, watching the sun lower toward the clay walls. The heat outside remains merciless, but in here, it's peaceful. Your breathing slows. The walls radiate the day's warmth, yes, but not oppressively. They've been doing this for centuries. They know how to hold the heat, how to release it gently as the night falls. And the scent, what is that? Not just mint tea, there's something else. Perhaps rosewater, soaked into the bricks, or basil leaves tucked behind a windowsill. It's subtle, but calming, like a memory of comfort rather than a loud declaration of it. A breeze passes again, and you close your eyes for just a second, then another. You think of home, your fan or your AC unit humming away, but something about this feels more human, more connected, like you're not fighting the elements but inviting them to dinner and letting them chill out in the courtyard. Outside, a donkey brays, a neighbor's windcatcher creaks ever so slightly. The sounds are sparse, spaced like lazy thoughts. You shift onto your side, and the cushion beneath you exhales a puff of air scented faintly with dust and basil. The walls, the breeze, the water, they're working together. They've done this for hundreds of years. And you, lucky time traveler that you are, have just begun to understand it. You tilt your head back again, gazing up at the windcatcher above. From this angle, it looks like a tall, hollow reed planted upside down on the roof. You'd be forgiven for mistaking it as decorative, maybe even a tower for pigeons or a lookout post. But no, this is architecture with a job. And like a camel in sandals, it handles that job with quietly brilliant efficiency. The badger or windcatcher may be one of the oldest pieces of passive climate technology still in use today. Its concept is simple but ingenious. Catch the wind and redirect it down into the home. Even on windless days, these towers somehow coax the air into movement. They're the original overachievers of architecture. Inside the tower's vertical shaft, openings are angled to catch even the slightest breeze. Depending on where the wind is coming from, only one or two sides need to be open. The air rushes in, moves down the shaft, and is funneled into the rooms below. Often it passes over water, whether from a fountain, a bowl, or even an underground qanat cooling as it goes. You wander up a set of stairs now, not to the rooftop itself, but to a quiet little chamber just beneath the tower. It's dim and comfortably warm, not stifling. You can hear the whisper of the wind above. The air that reaches this room feels like it's been trained. Polite, steady, never too much, never too little. You think briefly of modern AC systems blasting like over-caffeinated dragons and smile at the elegance of this ancient compromise. Some of the windcatchers, you notice, are massive up to 10 meters tall. Others are small, almost modest in size, tucked along the edges of buildings like chimneys with better manners. Historians still argue whether they evolved purely out of Persian ingenuity, or if their design spread along ancient trade routes from Mesopotamia or even North Africa. Whatever their origin, they flourished in Persia, where they became as essential as the walls themselves. Your guide, or perhaps it's just your dream self now, invites you to look more closely at one particular windcatcher. This one's octagonal, each face carefully angled. You notice intricate brickwork up its shaft, not decorative exactly, but purposeful design to create turbulence that slows hot air and encourages cooler air to descend. This particular model is a downdraft tower, but not all windcatchers work this way. Some use updrafts, where hot air from inside the house rises and escapes through the tower, naturally pulling cooler air in from lower vents or shaded courtyards. It's the same principle that makes a chimney draw smoke, but with breezes instead of fire. And here's the real trick. When paired with subterranean qanats, those underground water channels that run silently beneath the city, the windcatchers become even more powerful. The wind is not only caught, but cooled by evaporation as it moves over the water. It's a symphony of natural physics and minimalism. You run your fingers along the inner edge of the shaft, feeling the texture of sun-baked bricks. Rough, warm, but not scorching. These bricks are made from mud, straw, and sun. They breathe. They store heat during the day and release it at night. Your fingers brush over a series of narrow slits near the base. These vents, cleverly placed, can be closed or opened to redirect airflow depending on the season. And yes, these towers are seasonal. In the winter, homeowners block the vents, sealing off the wind. Some towers even have dampers and flaps to control the air more precisely. It's like a low-tech thermostat, guided by intuition and centuries of architectural wisdom. You glance at the corners of the room. No whirring fans, no humming compressors, just cushions, curved walls, and silence punctuated only by the faint, ever-present breath of the windcatcher. It almost feels like being inside a living thing. In some grander homes, Multiple windcatchers were arranged to coordinate airflow across large courtyards and corridors. Engineers of the time, though they weren't called that, used trial and error and probably a healthy dose of inherited wisdom to figure out where each tower should go. They understood prevailing winds, angles of sunlight, even the albedo of their walls without ever hearing the word albedo. A fringe theory floats into your sleepy mind now, one that suggests these towers may have also served ritual purposes or spiritual ones. After all, breath is sacred in Zoroastrianism, and the wind was no trivial thing. Perhaps the towers were not just functional, but symbolic, representing the balance between human life and the natural world. The room grows dimmer as the sun moves across the sky. Light filters through a high lattice window, throwing soft patterns on the floor like sleepy calligraphy. A cat wanders in and flops beside the vent, clearly a connoisseur of airflow. You lie back again, letting the breeze trace your face. It's subtle, but there's something magical in it. Not in a sorcery kind of way, more like that first breeze after a thunderstorm. That precise kind of cool that doesn't rush, but arrives exactly when you need it. As the air moves around you, you wonder, what would happen if the power went out in your modern apartment right now? Would your space still breathe? Would the walls help you sleep, or radiate heat like a toaster oven in July? Your host appears once again, holding a clay pitcher. He pours water into a shallow dish and sets it in the corner of the room. It's not for you necessarily, it's for the air, so it can pass over the water, pick up a little chill, and spread it through the house like gossip whispered between mud brick cousins. You smile. This house isn't just built, it's tuned. A living lung of baked earth and air, and tonight, it's tuned for you. You wake slowly from your nap, not because of heat or sound, but because the breeze has shifted, just slightly. It now moves across your skin like silk in slow motion, cooler, touched faintly with moisture. You sit up and stretch, the low groan of your joints mixing with the faint rustle of date palms outside. You're still in that ancient house, where time hums softly and architecture breathes for you. Your host gestures once more, this time toward the rear of the courtyard, where a small stone staircase descends into the earth. He hands you a lamp and nods, so down you go, past old stone steps and cool walls that seem to sigh the deeper you go. The air grows colder, not dramatically, just steadily, as if the very rocks remember a time before the sun. You're entering the qanat, an underground water system unique to ancient Persia and one of the most quietly astonishing engineering feats of the pre-modern world. Imagine this: a water source high up in the mountains, fed by melting snow. Now imagine gently sloping tunnels dug by hand, yes, hand that guide, that water down into the desert, sometimes for dozens of miles, without a single pump. And here you are, standing in one. It's quiet except for the faint echo of trickling water. You touch the wall. It's damp and surprisingly cold. A soft breeze brushes past your shoulder again, not from above, but from the tunnel itself. The qanat isn't just moving water, it's moving air. Here's the trick. Some windcatchers are connected directly to qanats. They catch the wind, which flows downward into the cool tunnel. That air is then cooled further by contact with the cold, moist air around the flowing water, and finally it's pushed back up into the house. It's like air conditioning run by gravity and good manners. Historians still argue whether the cooling effect was intentional or a lucky side benefit of the water system. Either way, the ancient Persians quickly figured out how to pair the two in clever ways. You might even think of them as the original HVAC designers, except their systems came with built-in tranquility and zero utility bills. As you follow the tunnel, your lamp casting sleepy shadows, you see the vertical shafts spaced above you. Access points for cleaning, ventilation, and construction. They rise like chimneys to the surface, making the whole qanat look from above like a dotted line carved into the desert. You pause beside the water channel itself. It's no more than a few inches deep here, but it's fast-moving and clear. A frog plops away at your approach, and you can hear, faintly, the sound of dripping water echoing through the stone. These sounds are strangely calming, like the world is exhaling very, very slowly. And then you hear something else. Music? No, too soft. Maybe it's the breeze funneling through a shaft above. Or maybe it's your imagination layering in the memory of old flutes and clay drums. You sit by the edge of the channel for a moment. It's the perfect temperature down here. Not cold, not warm, just steady. You could fall asleep in this tunnel if not for the occasional drip on the nose. You rise, stretching a little as you head back up. The climb is gentle, and the light from above is brighter now. Late afternoon, probably. The desert sun is still blazing, but you're refreshed, as if the tunnel itself lent you some of its calm. When you emerge, you notice how much more tolerable the heat is now. Not because it's cooler outside, but because you know there are places like that, beneath the surface. Cooling chambers woven beneath homes and streets like secret arteries. You look at the town differently now. Every tower you spot is connected to a strategy, every shaded passage, every tall courtyard wall, every oddly angled window. It's all part of a plan, a survival plan, a comfort plan, an architectural whisper that says, "We thought about this." In some regions, these qanats even powered water clocks, measured irrigation schedules, and sustained entire cities that otherwise should have crisped into oblivion. They weren't just cool, they were life. You wander through a quieter neighborhood now. The alleys are narrower. No carts pass, just the occasional cat or boy running barefoot across hot stones that have cooled just slightly thanks to the clever orientation of the street. Another little-known fact slides into your mind. Some of these tunnels extended all the way into public bathhouses or caravanserais, keeping travelers and merchants cool while they rested or rinsed the dust of the road from their sandals. You picture someone much like yourself, weary from travel, stepping into one of these subterranean chambers 1,000 years ago and letting the chill wrap around them like a borrowed robe. There are even tales, fringe ones, admittedly, that some Persian poets believed the qanats were sacred. They weren't just infrastructure, they were veins of the earth herself. Life flowing in silence, movement without sound, cooling without force. You walk past a woman drawing water from a small stone well in the courtyard of her home. She waves gently. The bucket glides up without hurry. She doesn't say anything, but her pace, her ease, her calm, they say everything. These people don't fear the desert. They outwit it. As the sun tilts lower, the windcatchers pick up again. You can hear a faint flute being played on a rooftop somewhere, a goat brays from a nearby paddock, and beneath your feet, you now know cold water runs quietly, nourishing the roots, feeding the breeze, and doing what ancient systems do best, just enough. You pause in an arched doorway, placing your hand on the warm mud brick. The wall hums gently, not a sound, but a feeling. The air moves past your shoulders again, not aggressively, just helpfully. And without knowing when it started, you're cool again. Not chilly, not shivering, just right. You step through the doorway into a long corridor lined with faded murals, blue and ochre, and sun-kissed rose, their pigments surviving 1,000 desert days. The passage curves gently, just enough to shade itself from direct light. The breeze follows you like a loyal servant, guided by careful architectural nudges. You're not thinking about airflow anymore. Not consciously. It just feels good, and that's the point. This part of the city is quieter, more residential, though you wouldn't call it sleepy. There's a hum here, kids laughing faintly over a wall, a low chant from a far-off prayer hall, someone grinding herbs with rhythmic patience. The homes you pass are variations on the same clever theme. Mud brick, windcatcher, shaded courtyard, but everyone has its own personality. You stop before a particularly elegant house, its door, painted with delicate calligraphy, and flanked by 2 small windcatchers, like twin ears, listening to the sky. Your guide taps gently, and a boy opens the door with a grin that suggests he's seen many dream travelers before. He beckons you inside, barefoot on polished stone floors, cool enough to shock your souls. Inside, the air is even cooler than before. You look up, and now you see what's new. A central courtyard, open to the sky, with slender trees growing around a small fountain. The water ripples softly. You recognize the design now. The courtyard channels coolness into the heart of the house, and the windcatchers placed on opposite walls circulate that air like a lazy figure eight. You settle onto a cushion beneath a carved wooden screen that filters light into leafy shapes. From this angle, the house feels like a machine, but a beautiful one. One built not for power or speed, but for balance, for grace. Every wall, every doorway is a decision. Nothing is accidental. The boy brings a small cup of doog, a salty yogurt drink served cold with mint. It's a local favorite, oddly refreshing, and just tart enough to perk you up without waking you fully. You sip it and glance toward the corner of the courtyard, where an elderly man sits tuning an oud. He plucks a note or two, nods once in approval, then sets it aside. Apparently, even music needs to rest here. This home, your guide whispers, belonged to a wealthy merchant family. Not royal, not noble, just very good at trade. Silk, spices, and unsurprisingly ice. You raise an eyebrow. Ice? In a desert? Yes. In fact, right beneath this house is a small yakchal, an ancient ice pit, one of the crown jewels of Persian climate mastery. You're invited to take a peek. Down another staircase you go, into a vaulted chamber lined with thick mud brick and ash-based plaster. The temperature drops again. It's not freezing, but it's cold enough that your breath becomes briefly visible. In the past, these underground chambers were used to store ice brought down from nearby mountains in winter, or in some cases, made locally by a very slow process of night freezing and insulation. The ice was then packed in straw or sawdust and lasted well into the summer. Wealthy households had their own mini yakchals, while public ones served entire neighborhoods. Historians still debate how efficient these private pits really were, and whether ice was common or an elite luxury. But standing here, chilled and curious, you can't help but admire the ambition. They didn't just try to survive the heat, they tried to outwit it with elegance and frozen treats. Back upstairs, the housewife is placing cold rosewater cloths over the windows, a trick still used today. The scent is faint but comforting. You inhale slowly. Somewhere, someone is baking cardamom bread. The family's architecture reflects a principle now mostly lost, that comfort should be passive, not the result of constant noise, consumption, or mechanical whirring, but of design, of materials that breathe, of layouts that listen to the wind. You're ushered into the Iwan, a semi-enclosed terrace space facing the courtyard. You lie back against a bolster, your head tilted toward the open sky. The sun has lowered just enough that golden light bathes the walls without burning. The windcatchers catch this moment perfectly, air drifting in like a lullaby. No fanfare, just service. You think again about your own space windows sealed, humming appliances, maybe a portable fan aimed directly at your face. There's a difference between feeling cool and being in a cool place. This house is cool, like a natural extension of a mountain cave, but scented with roses and mint. You smile to yourself as a lazy cat pads across the courtyard tiles and collapses under the date tree. You're not the only one who appreciates good airflow. The kid returns with a tiny clay pot of pomegranate seeds, chilled just enough to feel like jewels against your tongue. You're being spoiled gently by people who understand summer not as an enemy, but as a challenge. And all around you, the badgers stand like old sentinels, humming their wind song, catching whispers from mountains, deserts, rivers, and passing clouds. They don't shout their purpose. They just keep you comfortable. You close your eyes again, letting the breeze trace one cheek and then the other. It's steady now, purposeful. This house is alive, not buzzing, not straining, just existing, perfectly tuned to the moment. You hear the oud again, just a few notes, floating up from the corner like drowsy butterflies. Someone is humming a lullaby. You don't understand the words, but the tune feels familiar, like something your bones remember. The wind shifts again, gently, as if exhaling, and you, half full of dew, half asleep on embroidered cushions, exhale too. You wake again, not with a start, but the way a cat stirs when the sun shifts an inch. The courtyard has dimmed. The light is now longer, warmer, stretched out like honey across the floor tiles. The breeze hasn't left you. It's simply slowed its rhythm, like a companion matching your breath. You're beckoned gently, no rush toward the rooftop. The stairs are narrow and worn smooth by time. As you emerge into the open air, the view opens up around you like the last line of a poem. The sky stretches wide, tinged with peach and lilac. Rooftops ripple across the city like terracotta waves, each one crowned with the architectural punctuation of a windcatcher, some tall and stately, others short and square, all catching the last kiss of evening light. This is the moment when desert cities become symphonies. The heat finally loosens its grip. The people reappear, drifting onto rooftops with cushions and tea, like flowers blooming in reverse. Here, on the roof, the windcatcher works its quiet magic right above your head. You peek inside. It's hollow, of course, a shaft lined with baked brick and often divided into channels. If the wind comes from the north-facing channel delivers it downward. If from the south, the reverse. Some even have damp reed mats or small pools of water at the base to cool the air further. Primitive, elegant evaporative cooling. You lie back on a woven mat. A soft clink beside you signals a glass of saffron tea with sugar crystals perched on the rim. The stars begin to wink into place one by one. Below, the city sighs, a contented, sleepy sound. From up here, you can finally appreciate the urban planning at play. Streets are narrow to maximize shade. Alleys often zigzag to break wind and trap cooler air. Houses cluster around shared courtyards, creating microclimates that are surprisingly effective. Historians still argue whether this design was centrally imposed or evolved organically through generations of trial and error. Either way, the effect is deliberate, soothing. The entire city is a thermal organism, and right now, you are resting on its gently breathing skin. You notice something else. Chimneys. Not for smoke, but for thermal siphoning. Some houses pair windcatchers with solar chimneys, dark vertical shafts that heat in the sun, drawing air upward and out while the windcatcher pulls cooler air in. A natural circulation system, a sort of thermal heartbeat, and it's all silent. That's the part modern life forgets, how cooling can be quiet. No fans buzzing, no compressors kicking on, no thermostat clicks. Just wind, water, brick, and time. Someone down the block releases a kite, and for a moment, the red paper triangle dances between rooftops like a lazy sparrow. A child laughs, then immediately hushes, as if not wanting to wake the city too soon. You sip your tea. Even your glass is designed for this place, tall and narrow, to cool quickly and minimize hand heat. You wonder how many other things have been shaped by this dance between sun and shelter. Clothing, recipes, even storytelling styles. A donkey brays once in the distance, and a rooftop lantern flickers to life. Your guide. Ever quiet, ever nearby tells you about seasonal wind festivals once held in these cities. People celebrated the windcatchers as if they were spirits, honored for their gifts of comfort and breath. There were songs, offerings, even decorations hung from the towers like earrings on sky priests. You chuckle softly at the idea, then realize you're smiling because it makes sense. These aren't just buildings, they're relationships, between people and place, between temperature and design, between you and the air on your cheek. As the last light fades, your eyes wander to a curious sight near the horizon, low mounds that glint faintly in the dusk. They look like upside-down bowls. Your guide leans closer. Those are ancient ice domes, the full-scale yakchals, big enough to house tons of winter ice under layers of thick insulation. They resemble small ziggurats, built with that special mud and straw mix that resists both heat and decay. The interiors were conical, with spiral paths leading down to the ice chamber. The outer shell? High albedo, reflective enough to bounce sunlight away all day. The idea that these cities had ice storage in the middle of the desert 2,000 years ago feels less and less surprising now. It's not that they conquered nature. It's that they understood it. You lie back again, hands behind your head, the night now fully arrived. The stars are out in force, their light crisp and ancient. A breeze loops lazily through your windcatcher's mouth, cooled by the day's shaded bricks and the qanat-fed moisture below. You might not notice it, but the breeze changes every few minutes. The temperature shifts half a degree. The air moves from one cheek to the other. The windcatcher adjusts its rhythm, as if listening to your breath and choosing to match it. Somewhere, a cat leaps between rooftops. Somewhere else, a lute strums a sleepy chord. The wind slides across your face again, cool, curious, careful. And you, still half dreaming, still cradled by ancient comfort, let yourself drift just a little deeper into this quiet city of air. You descend from the rooftop slowly, your fingers brushing the clay walls for balance. The stairs are cooler than you expected. They've been shaded all day, absorbing none of the sun's fury. Each step is a small kindness, and that's something you're noticing more and more. The architecture here is polite. It doesn't fight nature, it simply bends with it, flows around it, makes room. At the bottom of the stairs, you're led through a narrow side alley that smells faintly of basil and dust. An older man nods as you pass, his sandals making a soft shuffling sound against the worn bricks. He's carrying a covered pot, which your guide whispers is filled with falude, an ancient Persian frozen dessert made from vermicelli noodles and syrup, cooled in none other than a yakchal. Yes, ice noodles. You're intrigued, mildly suspicious, and definitely going to try it later. As the alley opens into a wider thoroughfare, you begin to understand something else about this city. It is engineered not only for temperature, but for rhythm. The streets aren't laid out in strict grids, nor are they entirely chaotic. They curve gently, widening and narrowing, forming pockets of silence between the bustle. This isn't accident. It's acoustic, urban breathing. You pass a cluster of vendors packing up their carts for the night. One of them waves a fan made of dried palm leaf, not at himself, but over a stack of clay jars filled with drinking water. They've been sweating all day, kept cool by evaporative cooling, just like the windcatchers. Even something as simple as a jar gets to be clever here. Your guide stops and points toward a slightly sunken building, no more than a door, really, below street level. Qanat Tunnel, they murmur. And there it is, the hidden heart of Persian air conditioning. A qanat is an underground water channel carved painstakingly through rock and earth, stretching for kilometers from distant foothills to the heart of the city. The water travels slowly, protected from evaporation by earth and geometry. These tunnels not only supplied water, but acted as natural coolants. Sometimes, windcatchers were built to pull air across the surface of the qanat, allowing the moving wind to absorb the chill of the subterranean stream before delivering it to the house above. It's like ancient air conditioning via sky straw and mountain tears. Historians still argue about just how widespread this technique was, whether it was a luxurious rarity or a communal system. But one thing is clear: the combination of wind and water, sky and earth, made Persian cities breathable long before electricity was even a glint in a scientist's eye. You peer into the tunnel. The air drifting out is noticeably cooler and damp, like a secret breath. For a moment, you imagine the labor involved, digging for weeks, sometimes years, with little more than hand tools and hope. You picture the workers crawling through tunnels by torchlight, measuring slope by instinct, guided by sound and feel. The qanats weren't just engineering feats, they were infrastructure woven with mythology. Some were said to hum, others were believed to carry wishes whispered into their mouths all the way to the mountains. You pull back, the cool breath of the qanat lingering on your skin. From here, the street curves again, leading you past a public hammam, or bathhouse. It's closed for the night, but you can smell faint traces of rosewater and steam. Hammams, too, were carefully ventilated using windcatchers and qanat air, designed to separate hot rooms from cool ones, control condensation, and create spaces where one could sweat without suffocating. Inside the hammam, hot stones were doused with water to create clouds of steam, but the rest of the structure kept airflow constant, warmth without staleness. You imagine stepping from the hot stone slab into a cool antechamber, a towel pressed into your hands, infused with mint. Someone taps a lantern alight as you pass. You're led now toward one of the oldest parts of the city, the former administrative center, where the governors and architects once debated plans over date syrup and diagrams. You walk through arches that filter starlight into fragments, shadows and geometry playing on the floor like a celestial puzzle. Here, your guide stops in front of a windcatcher so tall it disappears into the night sky. It's four-sided, unlike the two-channel towers of the smaller homes. Each face is tuned to catch wind from a different direction, and above it, barely visible, sits a turning copper fin, like a weather vane crossed with an astrolabe. This one adjusts, your guide murmurs. It shifts its chambers to follow the breeze. You raise your eyebrows. A windcatcher with moving parts? That's next-level air taming. Scholars still debate how exactly these towers operated, whether the vanes were functional or symbolic. Some insist they were early examples of dynamic ventilation, while others believe they were simply status markers, like rooftop crowns for those who had truly mastered the air. You step inside the building beneath it, a long hall with lattice windows and intricate plasterwork. The air here is cooler than anywhere you've felt so far. It's like stepping into a bowl of shade. You don't need to know the names of the materials. You can feel the intelligence in every brick. You linger there a moment, just breathing. When you step back out into the night, your skin feels different, dry, light, restored. As you walk away from the tower, you think of all the cities you've lived in. How many of them tried to tame their environment with force, with glass and concrete and buzzing machines? And here, in this quiet desert place, they listened instead. They learned the shapes that heat likes, the paths that wind prefers. They built accordingly. The street narrows again as you near your resting place for the night. Somewhere nearby, you smell saffron rice cooking. A dog barks once and then settles. The stars wheel gently overhead. You're almost ready for sleep. But first, those ice noodles. The falude is waiting for you. You're ushered through a quiet side courtyard, where the lanterns swing slightly on their chains, casting golden loops across the paving stones. A bowl is placed in your hands, cool to the touch. Inside, translucent noodles resting in a syrup of lime, rose water, and crushed ice. It's a little crunchy, a little chewy, a little floral. You take a bite. It tastes like a snowstorm wrote a love letter to a lemon grove. You smile. So this is what ancient air conditioning was really for. Dessert. As you settle in under a small pergola of grapevines, your host, an elderly woman with silver-threaded hair and the quiet confidence of someone who's outlived a dozen dynasties, leans in and starts to tell you about summer in Yazd. Not the romanticized, brochure-ready kind. The real one. The one where temperatures soar over 40 degrees and the walls shimmer like mirages. She remembers being a child, waking to the distant hum of the qanat caretakers inspecting the tunnels at dawn. They used to listen to the ground, she says, tapping a knuckle to the floor, like the earth was whispering to them. You imagine that men crouched, ear to the soil, interpreting murmurs in the dark. The caretakers, or mokanas, were both engineers and mystics in the eyes of many. It was their job to maintain the delicate slope of the qanats, often less than 1 degree over kilometers. A mistake meant flood or drought. Some say they used candles to measure airflow. Others claim they trained birds to detect dampness. Historians still debate whether their techniques were scientific or intuitive. Either way, the result was a water system so efficient that parts of it still function today, thousands of years later. As the woman continues, your bowl of falude empties, and you realize this dessert wasn't a rare treat. It was strategic. When made with ice from the Yakchal and flavored with ingredients known to reduce internal heat, it helped regulate the body's temperature on searing days. The noodles weren't a gimmick, they extended the melt time. The syrup was more than sweet, it was medicinal. Even dessert in Persia had a cooling function. She laughs softly when you ask about air conditioning as we know it today. Oh, the new machines? She waves a hand dismissively. Loud, expensive, weak. They blow hot air outside to make cold inside. It's rude. You chuckle. That's the thing here. Cooling isn't just physics. It's etiquette. She walks you over to a wall ordinary at first glance, but then you notice it's thick. Easily a meter. Built with mud brick, or kesht, mixed with straw and left to dry under the sun. These walls act as thermal batteries. They absorb heat slowly and release it even more slowly. During the day, the interiors stay cool. At night, they radiate what little heat they've stored. It's passive, effective, and makes your drywall back home look like a paper towel. She presses your hand against the surface. It's warm, but not hot. Calm, like a stone you might find beside a mountain stream. In some homes, she explains, these walls are double-layered, with hollow spaces in between. The air trapped inside acts as insulation, while the outer layer protects from the sun. You realize it's not just the windcatchers doing the work. The entire structure is in on the secret. She beckons you now to a low bench beneath a mesh window. The breeze slips through the lattice, cooled by the garden's evaporation. The garden itself, a Persian paradise, or paradisa, is part of the design. 4 quadrants, flowing water, shade trees. Not just beautiful, but functional. Every leaf, every fountain, contributes to cooling the surrounding air. You sit. The breeze drifts past your ankles. And suddenly, you're struck by the quiet complexity of it all. No wires, no fans, no dials to fiddle with. And yet your comfort is constantly maintained by a dozen overlapping systems, walls, water, wind, timing, tradition. You begin to understand why ancient Persian architects were called Bana'i Hazar Fikr, builders of 1,000 thoughts. She points to a distant rooftop. See that one? You do. That's my sister's house, built same year as this one, but her windcatcher opens on a different side. Her kitchen's on the cool end. You nod, impressed. The city isn't cookie cutter. Every home is tuned like an instrument to location, orientation, family habits. Some face prevailing winds. Others prioritize morning shade. One man, she says, even designed his windcatcher to bring in the smell of jasmine from a neighbor's garden. Now, that's luxury. Historians still argue how much of this was intentional design versus happy accident, but when you see the harmony, you find it hard to believe anything here was left to chance. A cat winds around your ankles. The woman nods at it. Even the animals follow the cool. She offers you a final cup of sharbat, a chilled herbal drink. You sip slowly, the taste somewhere between basil and cucumber. Refreshing in a way that doesn't shout, more like a whisper on the tongue. You thank her, and she waves it off with a shrug. This is just how we live, she says. It's not a miracle, it's listening. And as you leave the courtyard, the breeze presses one last cool kiss against the back of your neck. Not a gust, not a blast, just a reminder that in this city of wind and shadow, comfort is always close, always quiet, and always earned. You step back into the street just as the city begins to change costume for the night. Lanterns blink awake on every corner, casting slow-moving amber shadows. Windows crack open. The rooftops fill with hushed voices, laughter, and the occasional clink of teacups. The breeze picks up, not strong, just present like a loyal pet padding beside you. Tonight, you're staying in a caravanserai, an ancient roadside inn once used by merchants, pilgrims, and anyone else brave enough to cross the desert with goods, stories, or both. This one's been carefully restored. Same arched colonnade, same central courtyard, same deep walls that breathe instead of buzz. You're led to your room cool without effort, dim without gloom. The plaster on the walls is made with sarouj, a water-resistant lime-based blend that helps keep interiors cool. Even the floors are clever. Tiled with glazed ceramic, they stay cool to the touch hours after sunset. As you settle onto the firm cotton mattress, the innkeeper chuckles. Don't worry, no scorpions. We pay them off. You can't tell if he's joking. You decide it's funnier not to know. And as your eyes adjust to the soft glow from the lantern, you realize the air in the room is moving. Slowly, silently, but definitely moving. You glance up, sure enough. A vent high on the wall is connected to a windcatcher shaft. No fan, no humming, just a gentle current of air, perfumed faintly with dust, clay, and something that smells like fennel. It's almost eerie how effective it is. This is when it clicks. The brilliance of ancient Persian air conditioning isn't in any one part, it's in the symbiosis. The windcatcher doesn't work alone. It collaborates with walls, water, shade, materials, and even time itself. The whole structure becomes a thermal organism, reactive, intuitive, whispering its responses to sun and wind like a practiced musician. Historians still argue over how green these systems truly were. Some suggest they required heavy labor to maintain, especially the qanats. Others counter that once built, they ran for generations with little interference, unlike our energy-hungry HVAC systems. Either way, you can't help but admire the subtlety. From your window, you hear someone adjusting a rooftop curtain to control airflow, not blocking it entirely, just redirecting it. Cooling here isn't about on or off, it's about guiding the air, persuading it, like a polite host steering guests toward the shadiest table. You lie back and let the current brush your arms. This is when the stories start to return. Because cooling wasn't just a matter of mechanics, it seeped into culture, poetry, and everyday idioms. There's a Persian saying, Gol bi golab nemaresha, meaning a flower won't die from rosewater. It's used when someone's being fussy in a comfortable setting. But it also speaks to the belief that comfort should be natural, not forced. And you begin to wonder how many ancient poets were shaped by this environment, how many verses were inspired by breezes drifting through windcatchers, by a night spent sipping sharbat beneath the stars. The calm isn't just in the air, it's in the language, in the art. In fact, the Persian architectural term sardar means cool doorway, but it also came to signify hospitality. To offer someone shade and a breeze was more than good manners, it was moral architecture. And just like that, comfort becomes kindness. Function becomes philosophy. You start to notice that this worldview even affected fashion. Traditional Persian clothing often used layered, loose fabrics, not despite the heat, but because of it. The air circulates better between layers. Some outfits even mirrored the windcatcher structure, with long vents at the collar or under the arms, promoting airflow. You chuckle softly. Windcatchers, but make it fashion. Back at the caravanserai, a traveler in the next room is softly playing a sitar, a long-necked lute. The music wanders up through the latticework of your vent and blends with the breeze. It's not a performance, just sound doing what it does best, floating. And once again, you're struck by how every part of this world, music, food, architecture, even silence, is designed to flow. Not resist, not conquer, but flow. You pull the blanket up around your shoulders, not because you're cold, but because it feels like a gentle ritual. And you remember what your rooftop host said earlier. The breeze knows when you're ready. So you listen to the creak of the courtyard door, to the soft lap of water in the fountain, to the sleepy yawn of a passing camel. Yes, that's a real thing. And you think this wasn't just engineering, this was an emotional blueprint, a way to live with the land, not in spite of it. No one here tried to erase the heat. They just taught it manners. The morning comes softly, not with the blaring insistence of alarm clocks or fluorescent buzz, but with the rising song of doves and the pale gold light creeping in through your carved wooden shutters. You stir slowly, cooled by the lingering breeze that never quite gave up during the night. You slip on your sandals and step into the courtyard of the caravanserai. Already, someone is sweeping, an older man in wide trousers and a linen tunic, humming tunelessly, like he's dusting the air as much as the stones. A brass samovar puffs steam in one corner, and the scent of cardamom drifts toward you, impossibly inviting. A low table is set with flatbread, dates, and mint tea, and as you sit, you feel again how the design of this place regulates not just the temperature, but the tempo of the day. You can't rush here. Even the light takes its time. Today, you're heading out with a local guide to visit some of the oldest remaining windcatchers in the city, many of them still functional, some taller than minarets, their silent mouths open to the heavens like listening devices tuned to the winds. Your guide, Dariush, is a former stonemason turned walking encyclopedia, with a voice like gravel stirred in honey. He walks fast, but talks slow, pointing out everything from the way shadows stretch across alleys to how children used to drop feathers down windcatcher shafts just to see them dance. You know, he says, eyes glinting, they say the tallest windcatcher in Yazd once pulled a letter off a table. You laugh, unsure if it's a joke. He doesn't clarify. That seems to be his thing. As you follow him deeper into the city, he explains the four-directional windcatchers, also called charsu badgers, which could capture air from any direction and redirect it down into living spaces or underground storage rooms. These weren't just architectural flourishes, they were feats of climate strategy. The shafts were often lined with ceramic tiles or plastered with lime to reduce friction and cool the air further. Some were equipped with wooden dampers that could be opened or closed depending on wind strength. Others had evaporative basins at the bottom, where water would cool the air even more through vaporization. Historians still argue whether the Persians fully understood the thermodynamics, or whether their success came from generations of tweaking based on instinct and trial. Either way, the result is the same. Breezes on demand, centuries before electricity. One of the most astonishing stops is at the Daulatabad Garden, home to what is perhaps the tallest windcatcher still standing over 33 meters high. You crane your neck. It looks like the tower of a dreaming castle, or a lighthouse that guides coolness instead of ships. And the moment you step inside, that familiar breath of air slides over your face. No fans, no power, just design. Dariush grins. Even on a day like this, he says, and points to the thermometer nearby. It's 41 degrees outside. Inside, it's nearly 10 degrees cooler. You look around the room, arched windows, thick walls, a fountain murmuring in the center. The airflow isn't a gust, it's a tide. It moves around you, not at you. No dryness, no dust storm, just something close to comfort, and maybe a little smugness from the architecture. This is when he starts to tell you about how people once communicated with wind. Not literally, of course, but symbolically. In classical Persian poetry, wind often represented spirit, change, or divine favor. Poets like Hafez and Rumi used wind not just as scenery, but as metaphor, sometimes playful, sometimes haunting. There are even stories of wind divination, where travelers would interpret the way wind rustled through reeds, or how it entered a house, as omens for journeys, relationships, or harvests. Not everyone believed it, of course. But then again, not everyone understands why a perfectly good building should whisper instead of whir. The sun continues to rise, and the white stone around you begins to glow faintly. Dariush walks you to a shaded alcove, where a small diagram is carved into the wall. Simple lines showing the flow of air through walls, through vents, across water, up chimneys. It's a kind of map, but also a memory. He traces it with one calloused finger. This, he says, was the real power. Not kings, not armies. This kept people alive. You nod, feeling the weight of that. The idea that comfort wasn't just a luxury, it was infrastructure, ingenuity, inheritance. On the way back, you pass a ruined windcatcher, its mouth partially collapsed, vines crawling up its sides like time itself is trying to reclaim the secret. And yet, even here, with birds nesting in the crags and sand piling at the base, the design is still visible, still legible. It's a skeleton, yes, but a clever one. Dariush tells you some of these old towers are being rebuilt now. Not out of nostalgia, but necessity. With modern energy costs rising, cities like Yazd are looking again to the old masters of airflow, not for reenactment, but for relevance. It's almost ironic. What was once dismissed as primitive now looks like the future dressed in adobe. You arrive back at the caravanserai, just as the muezzin calls out for prayer. The sound drifts across the rooftops like the evening wind, soft, repetitive, rhythmic. You lie down on your mat once more, the cool air returning through the vent, like an old friend coming to check on you. And you begin to wonder not just how they built these windcatchers, but how they knew exactly what your skin would need centuries in advance. Later that evening, after a nap so restorative it feels like you traveled back in time, you head toward the edge of the old city where homes give way to fields, and the modern skyline fades into silence. The light's going bronze now, and even the breeze seems to be yawning. You're here to visit a traditional home, still lived in by a multi-generational family, complete with grapevines curling up the courtyard walls, and pigeons nesting in crannies you're too polite to mention. They welcome you with the easy confidence of people who trust in thick walls and good tea to impress their guests. Inside the home, the temperature drops dramatically, not jarringly cold, just perfectly comfortable, as if someone whispered, "Relax," into the plaster itself. The central house, a shallow pool, ripples gently, fed by underground water. You bend to touch it. Cool, with a faint scent of minerals and desert earth. The matriarch of the home gestures toward the ceiling. A slanted windcatcher shaft, painted with faded blue patterns, hums with a current you can't hear, but absolutely feel. It's subtle, like being gently exhaled on by the past. "We don't even think about it," she says, "until it breaks, and it never breaks." She smiles like someone who's slept through many, many hot summers. As you sit sipping sharbat-e, second jibbin of vinegar and mint syrup mixed with cool water, you start to appreciate the deeper layer of this system. How air conditioning here isn't just about survival. It's woven into memory, into architecture, into the rhythm of life itself. And it doesn't stop with the buildings. She invites you to the basement, called a sardab. Not just a storage room. This is where food was kept fresh before refrigeration, and where the family might nap during heat waves. The stairs curve down into silence. It smells of clay, dried herbs, and long-forgotten pickles. The walls are double-layered, creating an air gap. The floors are clay tile, slightly dampened for evaporative cooling. And at the far end of the room, Another air shaft, this one horizontal, drawing air across the floor in a loop that feels positively smug. Historians still argue whether sardabs like these were common across all classes or whether they were a luxury reserved for wealthier households. Some say simpler versions existed even in modest mud brick homes, less grand, perhaps, but still clever. Either way, you're beginning to notice the pattern, the layering of comfort. Above ground, the wind. Below, the cool earth. In between, materials that flex, breathe, and adapt without argument. As you climb back up into the courtyard, you realize that Persian architecture doesn't rely on dominance. There are no confrontational angles, no aggressive walls. Everything invites air, light, and you. And it's not just functional, it's theatrical. In many homes, including this one, windcatchers were deliberately aligned so that their shadows danced across walls at particular times of day. This created a kind of natural timekeeping and ambiance before ambiance was a thing. The breeze would arrive, and the room would dim ever so slightly. Cue nap, cue tea, cue storytelling. And oh, the stories. The grandfather of this house emerges just as twilight hits, and without much prompting, he begins one. Something about a desert djinn who tried to steal a windcatcher, thinking it was a minaret filled with treasure. Turns out, all he got was dust in his eyes and a scolding from an old woman with a broom. You laugh and he winks. That djinn still comes back now and then, he says, usually in July. Even myths here are built on airflow, and you're starting to feel it too. Not just the temperature drop, but the emotional climate of a world designed for rest. The kind of place where you don't have to battle the elements or each other, where the house is on your side. You ask the family how often they think about their windcatcher. The youngest girl shrugs. When it stops, maybe, or if a bird gets stuck. Apparently that happened once. A pigeon swooped in, panicked, then rode the shaft straight into the fountain like a feathery cannonball. It was fine, just ruffled. As the night stretches on, the family brings out dried mulberries and slices of melon, and you talk about everything and nothing. The breeze doesn't stop. The stars come out. Someone starts to sing, softly, almost to themselves. And the house, this patient, breathing house, listens. Because cooling here is not just about physics. It's about presence. It says, you're here, you made it. Let me hold you for a while. And somehow, in this ancient home with no thermostat, no wires, no screens, you feel more seen and more supported than in a luxury hotel. As you finally stand to leave, someone hands you a tiny ceramic charm, shaped like a miniature windcatcher. To remind you, they say, that there's always a way to let the air in. You tuck it in your pocket like a secret, and walk back into the nightlighter, cooler, and somehow steadier. You wake the next morning to a strange sense of stillness. Not silence, there are still birds, distant voices, the rhythmic sweep of a broom across bricks, but the air itself is resting. No breeze, no movement. The wind has taken the morning off. At first it feels disappointing. You've grown used to that soft, unspoken exhale from above. But when you open the wooden shutter beside your sleeping mat, you understand why. It's already hot, even at dawn. The kind of heat that seems to simmer up from the earth itself. And yet, the room is cool. How? You rise and start to trace the space with new eyes. The walls you now see aren't just thick. They're layered with earthen plaster and lime, designed to absorb daytime heat and release it slowly at night. The floor is slightly uneven, made of hand-cut stone that still holds the chill of early morning. Even without an active wind, the building's design continues its quiet work. You're beginning to appreciate that Persian air conditioning was never just about catching the breeze. It was about managing time, temperature, and texture in concert. The windcatchers were part of an ensemble like a soloist in a very ancient, very well-rehearsed band. So today, you visit a place where that ensemble becomes almost musical. The ancient ice houses, or yakchals. Yes, ice, in the desert, made and stored before refrigeration. You meet your guide near the edge of town, where the old city gives way to a scattering of domes and walls that resemble upside-down bowls. From a distance, the yakchal looks like a sunken beehive, made of pale clay with a small opening at the top and a tall, tapering body. Inside, it's cool, really cool. Enough that your breath almost ghosts in front of you. How? Let's go back a bit. In the winter months, Shallow evaporation pools were filled with water at night. Because desert nights dropped dramatically in temperature, ice would form, often several centimeters thick. Before sunrise, workers would break the ice into slabs and carry it down into the Yakchal's subterranean chamber, often 6 to 8 meters deep. There, the ice would be layered with insulating straw, kept cool through a combination of thick walls, ventilation shafts, and the same evaporative principles used in windcatchers. These structures were so efficient that ice harvested in January could still be used in August. Historians still argue whether this system was originally Persian, or adapted from earlier Mesopotamian or Egyptian models. What's certain is that Iran perfected it, creating not just storage, but seasonal rhythm. A summer without chilled sharbet? Unthinkable. You descend carefully into the Yakchal. Your fingers brush the wall. It's made of a material called saruja, mix of clay, ash, lime, goat hair, and sand, which made it not just waterproof, but almost thermally bulletproof, the kind of substance that laughs in the face of summer. There's a small shaft above that allows hot air to rise and escape, creating a vacuum that pulls cooler air in from lower vents. No fans, no machinery, just physics dressed in mud and straw. Someone hands you a tiny cup of rosewater and lemon over shaved ice. The contrast between the dry air outside and the crisp, icy flavor in your mouth is almost surreal. You sip slowly, as if speeding it up would ruin the illusion. And in this moment, you understand. Persian cooling wasn't just functional. It was luxurious. Not in the gold-plated excess sense, but in the way it honored pleasure, respite, texture. From the Yakchal, you're led to an old orchard irrigated by underground qanats or aqueducts. These gently sloping tunnels carried water from distant mountains, often traveling for miles beneath the desert, to feed cities, fields, and fountains. The air down here is still cooler than above, thick with moisture and life. Your guide, a wiry man with sun-worn hands, points to a small side vent near the orchard wall. This, he says, feeds into the kitchen of that house over there. Cold air from the qanat keeps the cucumbers from melting. You chuckle, but he's not joking. In fact, many traditional homes had their windcatchers connected to qanat vents, drawing cooled air that had passed over subterranean water directly into living quarters. The result? A kind of natural air conditioning loop. Air cooled by water, directed by wind, regulated by centuries of know-how. And here's the part that's especially delightful. This wasn't seen as science or magic. It was simply good architecture, like knowing when to plant your basil or how to use leftovers in a stew. It was, quite literally, the climate built in. You spend a little time sitting beside the orchard wall, the scent of fig trees and damp clay around you. Someone's baking bread nearby. You can smell the tang of sourdough mingling with smoke. And you start to wonder whether you'll ever be comfortable indoors again if it doesn't smell like this. You could stay here all day, but as the sun starts to climb high overhead, the tour wraps up. You ask your guide what happens when the windcatcher fails. He shrugs. Then we wait, or we fix it. Or we complain while drinking ice water. That's tradition. And maybe that's the lesson you've started to learn. Coolness isn't just physical. It's a way of responding, a built-in patience. A design not just for air, but for living in harmony with it. You return to the caravanserai in time for the call to midday prayer. The fan above your room's vent spins lazily, not powered by electricity, but by sheer pressure and physics. The air curls around your face. It smells faintly of dust and roses, and somewhere far above, through the shaft of a windcatcher, the sky whispers your name. By now, you've become a bit of an aficionado in the ancient art of staying cool. You find yourself listening not just to what people say, but to how the wind moves around them. You feel a smug little thrill when a breeze brushes past your cheek and you instinctively glance up. Yes, another well-positioned windcatcher doing its silent, invisible work. Today, you decide to explore how these marvels were maintained, because even the most elegant systems need the occasional poke and patch. And surprisingly, keeping a badger in working order required more than a ladder and a prayer. Your journey begins at a small local workshop run by a family of windcatcher masons whose lineage stretches back generations. The youngest son is no more than 11, Yet he can rattle off different types of badgers, four-sided, eight-sided, tall ones for mosques, squat ones for bakeries, as if naming distant cousins. Maintenance, it turns out, wasn't just practical, it was ritual. You watch as two men climb the windcatcher's inner shaft using not a ladder, but a knotted rope system, hoisting themselves upward with the quiet grace of chimney sweeps who've made peace with gravity. They emerge on the roof to check for cracks, blockages, or the occasional pigeon squatter. Apparently, they're fond of the view. One tells you about a summer years ago when a local merchant's windcatcher failed right before his daughter's wedding. The guests wilted like pickled turnips, he says. We had to fan them with carpets. Not ideal. So, every spring, a tradition known as Badger Cleaning Day took place in many cities. It was a communal affair, part repair job, part social event. People climbed rooftops, patched plaster, cleared debris, and, if they were feeling ambitious, repainted decorative motifs that had faded in the harsh sun. Some historians argue whether this ritual maintenance was primarily a religious duty, tied to notions of cleanliness and hospitality, or whether it was simply a practical necessity dressed up as a festival. Likely, a bit of both. As you peek into a freshly scrubbed windcatcher shaft, you notice tiny ceramic tiles embedded into the walls, designed to both reflect light and discourage birds from nesting. One mason chuckles and says, also makes it look fancy. No one wants an ugly breeze. You grin? Of course not. From the rooftop, you can see a patchwork of windcatchers across the city. Each one is subtly different. Some are sloped like sails, catching prevailing winds. Others have divided inner shafts, allowing homeowners to select which breeze they wanted. North, east, wherever it was cooler that day. Like having a dial on your air, centuries before thermostats. You're told that wealthier homes even had shutters or dampers inside the shafts, allowing fine-tuned control of airflow. On especially hot days, families would toss damp cloths into the shaft's path to add humidity, a homemade climate cocktail. But here's where it gets philosophical. Maintaining a windcatcher wasn't about perfection. The systems were passive, yes, but also forgiving. A chip in the plaster? It still works. A missing tile? Just a little less elegant. The breeze doesn't hold a grudge. And that's a very different approach from modern technology, isn't it? Your smartphone screen cracks useless. Your AC fails, panic. But a windcatcher? A little cracked, a little crooked, still humming its soft song above your head. In fact, one of the masons tells you that some of the oldest functioning badgers haven't been rebuilt in centuries. They're gently patched, never replaced, like wise old uncles who've seen too many summers to be rattled by another. As afternoon stretches into its golden phase, you're invited to visit a small public hammam, or bathhouse. Not for a bath, though that's tempting, but to see how cooling worked in more humid interior spaces. This is where the genius gets even subtler. The hammam is sunken into the ground, a design trick to leverage thermal inertia. The upper vents are connected to, you guessed it, a windcatcher. But not just any kind. This one is paired with a subterranean qanat, drawing cool air across the bath's changing rooms and communal lounging areas. It's like standing as a whisper. In the cool room of the hammam, where bathers relaxed before and after hot steams, you notice small ceramic vents shaped like fish. The guide explains these were often designed to both circulate air and delight the eye. Beauty and breeze, she says, always together. And that's the quiet revelation of the day. Cooling wasn't only about comfort, it was about aesthetic serenity. A well-maintained windcatcher wasn't just functional, it was a statement, a kind of rooftop poetry. In Yazd and other cities, competitions would sometimes arise. Who had the tallest, most elegant, or best-performing badger? And of course, who could maintain it without letting a single sparrow settle for long? Children would climb rooftops to fly kites near the windcatchers, trying to tempt a breeze closer to their own homes. Some say a particularly cool home could mean better prospects in marriage. No one wants to faint during a proposal, your guide jokes. And maybe there's something universal in that. We all want a life where coolness flows through us quietly, where problems can be patched with plaster and patience, where even a bit of dust becomes part of the story. You step back outside into the evening air, a light breeze is returning. Just a whisper for now, a sigh of stone and sky. The masons wave from a rooftop, calling it a day. Somewhere nearby, someone has lit a brazier for tea, and the scent of cardamom drifts through the alley. You've spent the day with those who keep the breath of old buildings alive, and somehow you're breathing easier too. That night, you lie awake for a moment longer than usual, not out of discomfort, but because you're listening. Really listening. To the gentle hiss of air through the windcatcher above your bed, the soft creak of woven shutters, the occasional distant footstep below. It's almost like the building itself is breathing. And then, as if on cue, the wind changes. You feel it snake across your toes, curl under your knees, brush your cheek. You smile. By morning, the idea of returning to modern air conditioning feels borderline offensive. You're not ready to give up the quiet genius of ancient airflow just yet. So, you head out in search of something more experimental, multifunctional cooling systems, designed not just to move air, but to shape space, sound, and scent. Today, you're visiting a structure that feels a bit like a maze and a bit like a dream. An ancient Persian garden pavilion tucked inside a larger courtyard estate. From the outside, the building looks deceptively simple, just low stone walls and a central dome. But step inside, and you're hit with a symphony of sensations. Cool air, even though the outside temperature has climbed past 40 degrees Celsius. Running water, trickling from narrow channels carved directly into the floor. Filtered light, bouncing off walls in dappled patterns thanks to a clever use of carved screens and mirrored tiles. And at the very heart of it all, air in motion, shaped by one of the most elegant integrations of architecture and physics you've seen yet. Here, the windcatcher doesn't act alone. It's partnered with a network of internal air channels, small ducts and passageways hidden inside the walls that distribute air across the building. Think of it as the ducted HVAC system of the 11th century, minus the electricity, the noise, or the monthly maintenance fees. Your guide, a scholar of ancient architecture with a passion for dramatic gestures, shows you how each room has a different temperature. The central chamber, directly beneath the windcatcher shaft, is the coolest. Flanking rooms, which face different compass directions, capture different qualities of wind-dry, moist, fast, or still. You walk into one such room and immediately notice the difference. It's cooler and smells faintly of jasmine. Turns out the vent here runs past an herbal planter box on the roof. The breeze literally filters through a miniature rooftop garden before entering the room. Why? Because air should be polite, your guide says with a wink. Historians still argue whether these systems were developed with intentional scent design in mind, or whether it was a happy side effect of having rooftop flora. What's agreed upon is that these microenvironments weren't just cooling people, they were offering personalized atmospheric experiences. And then there's the sound. The water channels you noticed earlier, they aren't just decorative. They're part of a cooling strategy called a salsabile, shallow, zigzagging water course that increases surface area and airflow, while also creating a gentle, bubbling noise. It's like a built-in white noise machine. Or, as your guide calls it, pre-Islamic ASMR. You crouch down near one and feel the soft mist rising from it, the air just a few degrees cooler here. Imagine being a weary traveler centuries ago, stepping off the sun-scorched road and into this paradise. No wonder Persian gardens were considered earthly representations of heaven Chahar Bagh, or four gardens, symbolizing paradise in Islamic and pre-Islamic texts alike. And at the very center of many of these gardens, a pool, often fed by qanats and flanked by cypress trees, symbols of eternity. The water reflects not just the architecture, but the movement of wind above it, creating a kind of meditative mirage. You follow the channels to an alcove where an ornamental fan hangs, not powered by wind, but activated by the slow drip of water filling a hidden reservoir. When the weight shifts, it tilts gently, sending a single, cooling puff of air downward. A moment of surprise in an already enchanted space. The more you see, the more you realize. This isn't just ancient air conditioning, it's multi-sensory environmental design, and it's frankly embarrassing how long it took modern architecture to catch up. You pause by an intricately carved lattice window, mashrabiya style. Though you're gently corrected, this Persian variant is older and more subtle. It allows air to flow while filtering sunlight into elegant shapes that dance across the floor. You step into the pattern, become part of it. And here's a fun detail. Some elite homes were even rumored to use perfumed water in their salsabil systems, rosewater, citrus, even hints of cardamom, so that the breeze came with a splash of fragrance. Lavish? Absolutely. Necessary? Maybe not. But once you've felt air that smells like a garden in bloom, it's hard to go back. Later, you rest beneath a painted ceiling rich with celestial patterns. Stars, moons, stylized clouds. As the wind brushes past, the whole room feels like it's turning slowly, as if the breeze were moving the sky itself. Someone offers you a sweet drink, saffron, cucumber, mint, and a touch of vinegar. Sharbat. You sip. It's cold. Not icy, but perfectly chilled by the building's ambient air and a bit of creative clay storage. You ask your guide why more places don't build like this today. He shrugs. People forgot they could, or they thought new meant better. But the wind doesn't care about trends. It still prefers walls that listen. You laugh, but it lingers with you. This wasn't magic. It was knowledge. Shared, adapted, passed down. Lost, perhaps, but not gone. You leave the pavilion in a dreamlike daze, ears tuned to the burble of water, skin still tingling from cooled air. It's the end of the day, and the sun slants low across the stones, but inside you, a quiet thought has taken hold. Maybe true innovation isn't in what we build, but in how we learn to feel the air again. You wake the next morning with a sense of calm, still wrapped around you like a linen sheet. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that for a few precious days, you've lived in a place that breathes with you stone, air, water, and all. But today is about movement again, the spread. You're tracing how the Persian approach to air cooling didn't just stay tucked away in Yazd or Shiraz, but radiated outward, carried by trade routes, imperial ambitions, curious engineers, and wandering scholars. Your journey begins not in a bustling city, but along a quiet, wind-kissed ridge, overlooking one of the ancient arteries of the world, the Silk Road. Merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, all of them pass through here, not just with silks and spices, but with ideas. And one of those ideas? Building structures that didn't fight the climate, but flowed with it. That, as you now know, meant bringing the breeze inside. As you sip cool tea in the shade of a weathered caravanserai, you listen to your guide, a wiry historian with more sun wrinkles than you can count, spin tales of windcatchers making their way eastward into Mughal India, where they influenced palace designs and summer pavilions. In Lahore and Delhi, for instance, jelly windows, those intricate stone lattices, began to mirror the airflow principles of Persian mashrabiyas. The Mughals added their own twist, of course, water channels that ran beneath marble floors, cooling them from below, and giant canvas awnings soaked in perfumed water, turning courtyards into breezy sanctuaries. Historians still argue whether this was direct Persian influence or if Indian builders had independently developed similar techniques. But trade records, diplomatic letters, and shared architectural styles suggest there was more cross-pollination than coincidence. Then, westward across Mesopotamia, where you catch glimpses of ruins in what's now Iraq, Syria, and beyond. Even the Romans, not ones to shy away from engineering grandeur, took notes. In places like Palmyra, you see hybrid structures, stonework with air shafts, gardens built around central pools, and even pergolas with misting systems using clay drip pots. Of course, not everything made it out intact. As empires fell and rose, as religions shifted and priorities changed, some designs were lost, buried beneath new tastes and materials. But the principle remained. Air, when guided well, becomes more than a necessity. It becomes a luxury. You hop forward a few centuries now, to the 18th and 19th centuries, when European travelers and colonial officers began sketching and documenting buildings across Persia, fascinated by what they saw. You flip through a copy of one such journal, where a British surveyor writes, The locals seem to have captured the very wind itself and persuaded it to serve them tea. You smirk. A little dramatic, sure, but not entirely wrong. And so, slowly, the windcatcher idea re-enters Europe, not as an imported structure, but as a philosophical nudge. Architects in southern France, Spain, and North Africa begin experimenting with ventilation towers, courtyards, and cross-ventilation strategies, trying to tame the summer heat without machines. In Egypt, you see the evolution of the malkafa, relative of the badger used in traditional Cairene houses. These tall, angled ventilation towers often funneled wind down into central atriums, sometimes combined with cooling fountains and shady meshrabiyas. You visit one such home in Cairo's old city. The malkaf here still works. You walk beneath it, feel the air whoosh past your ear. The house has no air conditioner. It doesn't need one. But perhaps the most surprising twist comes much later, in the 20th century, when modern architects start rediscovering passive design and realize it had already been perfected 1,000 years earlier. A university project in the 1970s attempts to replicate the badger qanat system for low-income housing in desert regions. The test building? Significantly cooler than its concrete counterparts. The verdict? Too experimental. The report shrugs. The irony doesn't escape you. Today, though, things are shifting again. You visit a modern eco-home in Iran, designed by a team of young architects blending ancient passive cooling with solar panels, green roofs, and clay walls. They're badger, sleek, minimalist, and functional. The wind it captures smells faintly of thyme and jasmine. They call it nostalgia architecture, but it's not about going backward. It's about recognizing that the future doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes, it just has to reopen a window. You sit with them over lunch, cold yogurt soup, fresh herbs, honeyed flatbread, and ask what they love most about designing this way. One architect pauses, then says, "It makes people feel cared for, like the building has been waiting for them." And isn't that the heart of it? From ancient Persia to today, the idea has always been about creating spaces where people can simply be without sweat, without noise, without strain. As you leave, they gift you a small clay model of a windcatcher. "Put it on your windowsill," they say. "Let the breeze remember you." You turn it over in your hands. It's smooth, cool to the touch, and slightly imperfect. You love it. Later that evening, you stand on a rooftop once more, the stars unfurling above. You close your eyes and feel it. That same wind, that same wisdom, dancing its old song through the night air. And somehow, across time and stone and sand, you understand it now. By now, you've walked in the shadows of windcatchers, stood barefoot on chilled stone floors, sipped minty sharbat beside bubbling salsabils, and run your fingertips along latticed windows that filtered more than just sunlight. You've felt the pulse of a 1,000-year-old design tradition, one that didn't just tame the desert, but spoke its language. But before we let go, there's one final place we need to visit. It's not on a hilltop or buried in sand. It's a little courtyard home still lived in on a quiet back street in Yazd. The door creaks open. You duck inside. The home isn't famous, it doesn't appear in textbooks, but its walls carry stories, and its windcatcher still works. Inside, an elderly couple greets you with that practiced ease that comes from decades of offering tea to curious visitors. Their daughter is an architect. She redesigned the roof last year, reinforcing the badger shaft with local brick and adding an insulated cooling chamber. But the core system? Purely ancient. The woman shows you the small cellar room, cool even in peak afternoon. It smells faintly of dried limes and wool blankets. The man pours you a second cup of tea and leads you to the rooftop garden, where low herbs and potted citrus trees rim a square around the windcatcher. He gestures upward. "It sings," he says. And you listen. It's true. The wind moving through the shaft produces a low, whispery hum like someone exhaling slowly in the next room. He says they used to hear it better at night, before the city got louder. It was once louder with life, he means, not cars or air conditioners. Some people say we should replace the tower with a solar unit, he says, but the wind has fed us longer than the sun has powered batteries. You nod. You walk down into the house again and notice, for the first time, how still everything feels. Not stagnant, just peaceful. The air moves softly, with purpose. Every doorway is a transition in temperature, every corridor a slow exhale. It's almost as if the house knows where your body wants to go and guides the air ahead of you, preparing the space. You sit beneath the tower one last time. The tea is warm, the air is cool. You're perfectly still. And for a moment, just a blink in the long timeline of wind and stone, you feel part of something vast, ancient, and astonishingly gentle. And now, the story slows. Wind down final 300 words. Your breath settles into a rhythm, matching the slow rise and fall of imagined sails above you, banners fluttering at the top of windcatchers, catching the breeze like sleepy kites. The world around you softens. The stones blur. The hum of ancient air tunnels fades into a whisper in the background of your thoughts. Your body grows heavier, as if gravity itself were working in sync with the breeze, pulling you gently down, not harshly, but like silk falling through water. You remember the feel of cool tile under your feet, the sound of running water echoing through shaded halls, the soft scent of mint, dust, and warm clay. In this stillness, your mind lets go of modern machines, schedules, and thermostats. There are only winds here, winds that know how to listen, winds that have learned to bend and bow and curl around your breath like a lullaby. Tonight, the badgers keep watch. They stand tall, quiet sentinels above rooftops that shimmer in moonlight. They've been doing this for over 1,000 years, gathering air, guiding it downward, turning heat into calm. Let them do it now. Close your eyes. Let the ancient air surround you, cool, kind, and unhurried. There's nothing left to do but drift, float, dream,